How's it going, guys? This is Steve from Red Riot Games, and today I'm joined with Dante, our famed Canadian Flesh and Blood reigning, defending champion, and he's going to be showing us his Ira Crimson Blood Haze deck tech here. He's going to go through a deck profile, sorry, and he's going to be talking about what the cards he's using and some of the combos he sets up. So, with that said, let's go. Dante, go ahead.
Thanks for the intro, Steve. I'm Dante. You've probably met me online at some point because I've played in basically every North American, European, Portuguese, whatever, like everything tournament that there's ever been. So you've probably met me at some point. We've probably played a game together. If you're playing OTK Viserai or OTK'd me with Kano, I'm probably pretty salty. But usually I'm a nice guy. But yeah, so Steve asked me to do this deck profile, and I'm happy to do it. This is basically the deck that I bring to that I've brought actually to every skirmish that I've ever played in. There have been a couple of changes along the way, but nothing major, and it's served me well. I've won quite a few of the skirmishes, so I'm happy to go through the list and help explain some of the choices. It's your standard kind of Ira control list. Nothing really too special, but a lot of people DM me on the daily and ask me for tips and stuff like that. So I'm happy to go through this with Steve, put a video out there for you guys, and help where I can. New Zealanders will probably laugh at me, but it's valuable information for North America, so I'll help out there. But yeah, you want to just get right into it, Steve, or do you have any other questions?
So go ahead and let us know, the first cards that come to mind as you go through this deck. Usually
Cool,
people like
yeah.
to go through the reds, the blues, but let's start with the equipment.
Well, obviously we're starting with Ira on my beautiful Ira playmat, Red Riot Games. Just go RedRiotGames.com, get yourself one.
Hey.
But yeah, so we're starting with Ira, obviously. The reason that I play Ira is because she is the most consistent hero in Blitz. I think that there are a whole bunch of really good heroes in Blitz, but personally, Ira suits my playstyle the best, specifically the way that I play the deck, which is very defensively. It works for me. And I like the consistency. I'm all about consistency. I don't like rolling dice with Brute and hoping to God that I get a Blood Rush Bellow turn 1 or 2. I don't like ripping off the top with Kano and hoping that I get lucky. That's not my style. My style is just play a consistent deck, and I'm a very defensive player just by nature. So the way that I've tailored the deck basically is, I guess, just plays to my strengths. So Ira, obviously, 2 Kodachi, pretty obvious, nothing special there, and 1 Zephyr Needle. Zephyr Needle is pretty much only used in the Wizard matchup. Also, if you're playing against an aggro dash deck, that's like heavy boost dash, you can play it against that because they're not running any defense reactions. You got to be careful though, because some people are playing control dash. You don't see it very often, but when you do and they break your needle, it's pretty sad. So you got to be careful for that. Needle's also pretty good against warrior, because most warrior decks nowadays are only running the 1 steel blade shunt, and you can get a lot of pressure in with the needle, even if it breaks. If it breaks early, you're pretty sad, but if it breaks closer to the late game, you've usually got them in a position where you don't really need it anymore, because you can just Kodachi and then play an attack for still quite a bit of damage that they're going to have to defend. And then you can kind of keep momentum that way. But if they break it early, you're pretty screwed. So it's a real gamble playing the needle. I wouldn't usually recommend it, to be honest with you. But if you're feeling spicy that day, go for it. But yeah, mostly against Kano for the needle. Then obvious equipment, Mask of Momentum, Breaking Scales, Tunic, Snapdragons, and then just the 4 Null Rune equipment. You never use the Null Rune boots. Honestly, you could switch this for probably like a Vest of the First Fist or something like that, or Breeze Rider boots maybe. Probably not Breeze Rider boots, because Snapdragons are just too good. Snapdragons are probably the best card in the deck. That card is pretty broken. But you don't need these. This is just like an extra equipment slot that I didn't know what to do with, so I threw the boots in. But even against Wizard, you're not running the Null Rune boots. You're just running Null Rune 3 and the Snapdragons. Even though the deck is defensive, it still has like offensive capability. Against Wizard, you kind of have to pivot and be a little bit more aggressive. You can't just be defending with every card you have. And most of the time, you're only defending 3 damage on your turn anyway, so there's not really much more to that. Going into the actual deck, though, two Sigil. I mean, I'm starting with the Sigil because it's just too obvious. Every deck in Blitz pretty much plays 2 red Sigil, unless you're playing Kano. After that, I'm just going to go into the blues. The blues are also pretty self-explanatory. They all kind of just look like garbage cards. Basically, the reason that every blue in the deck is played is because they pitch for 3 because they're blue. They cost 0. They're cards with combo, which is important for turning on for like defending after you defend with a flick flack, and they all block for 3. None of the blues in the deck block for 2. You want like maximum blocking capability from your blues. So that's the reason why every blue is played. And basically every Ira deck's blue count is going to look exactly the same because they play all the blues that meet that criteria. So the blues that meet that criteria are Rushing River, Fluster Fist, Rising Knee Thrust, Whelming Gust Wave, Crane Dance, and Find Center. These are probably, so Crane Dance and Find Center, I'll put them aside, put 2, 1 of each aside. Crane Dance and Find Center are probably the best 2 blues in the deck. They combo into each other. Basically, this is usually how I finish most of my games, is pitching a Crane Dance, pitching a Find Center, and just waiting until those 2 cards come up, and then killing my opponent with them. It's basically a guaranteed kill against everything that isn't a Guardian deck. Against Guardian, you can't kill them with that. Basically, what Find Center says is that if Crane Dance was the last attack this combat chain, Find Center can't be defended by cards with like resource cost less than the number of chain links you control, and it gains if it hits create a Zen State token. So most warrior decks, the highest cost card that they have is Overpower, which costs 3. So if you can get this to hit as your 4th chain link, they can't defend it. Same thing with Ira. Highest cost they have is 2, so 3rd chain link, they can't defend it, etc. So the combo is usually just pitch a blue or a yellow that costs 0, Kodachi, Crane Dance, and then break your boots and then play Find Center. You basically have to save your boots to hit the combo, and you have to pitch correctly and know when these are coming up. But that just kind of comes with practice. But Find Center is really good. I would say that this is how I win about 90% of my games. You'll even see, like, if you watch any of my gameplay on stream, you'll see me bust out the combo, and I do it pretty consistently. It's not too hard to set up, but you have to remember your pitch order, and you have to kind of have an idea of when it's going to be coming up. So that's those 2, and then the last blue that I play is
just 1 second. With Find Center, how much damage is coming through? Because it looks like it does 2 damage. So how much damage do you have Find Center coming in on?
Oh yeah, so usually Find Center is only doing 2 damage. You can use your breaking scales to make it 3 damage. Usually you're getting your opponent low, and they're blocking. At that point, you're probably pretty low as well. But once you get your opponent to that like 2 or 3 damage range, even 4, because generally speaking, if they're at 4, they're going to take the first Kodachi that you swing at them with. So if you're going Kodachi, Crane Dance, Find Center, they're going to take the first Kodachi, so that'll bring them down to 3, and then at that point you can go for your Find Center combo, basically. I feel like not a lot of people think I don't know how to explain it, but not a lot of people are like thinking that far ahead. So when they're at 4 life, it's not like they're not trying to dip underneath it. They're trying to get momentum back, and then that's kind of when you hit them with the Find Center. It helps if you have nothing that deals 7 left in your deck, and it also helps with not bringing games to fatigue. The issue that I find with bringing games to fatigue is that you can run into like situations where you get a tie with your opponent, which is basically just a double loss. You don't want that to happen. So it's important that you're able to actually kill your opponent in a timely manner. And basically, if you whittle them down and then just finish them off with the Crane Dance combo, it prevents them from continually blocking over and over and over again until you finally deck them out. So it just makes things a little bit easier.
Okay.
Cool. So that's on center. Um, and then the other blue that I run, this used to be Soulbeat Strike, but recently I changed it to Whisper of the Oracle. Obviously, this is not a ninja card. It doesn't have combo, but it does still pitch for 3, cost 0, and blocks for 3, which is staple in ninja deck. The reason that this card is run is specifically to be able to block against this card, Heron's Flight. So Heron's Flight, just so I don't have to read upside down, says if Crane Dance was the last attack this combat chain, Heron's Flight gains +2, and you choose attack action or non-attack action. Heron's Flight can only be defended by cards of the chosen type. So basically, this card is good for killing warriors. It's good for killing other Iras if they're not running Whisper of the Oracle, or they haven't pitched properly. Or they've been defending with their Whisper of the Oracle, and it's also good for killing warriors. Basically, you just declare either attack action or non-attack action. They can only block with cards of that type. Against the wizard, you would declare attack action, for example, and wizard doesn't actually have any attack action cards. They're all actions, or non-attack actions. So they can't defend Heron's Flight, and then they basically have to go for their full combo. And if they've already defended some of the previous attacks in that combat chain, they'll probably have a pretty tough time killing you if they're either ripping off the top or trying to deal with their boots. It basically puts them in a situation where if they haven't hit their setup, or they don't have the correct card in arsenal to play with the boots, or in their hand to play with their boots, they're probably going to end up losing because they won't be able to deal enough damage to you. People in New Zealand call this card garbage, which is fair. It's tough to set up. It's not super consistent. I like it because it has combo, so if I need to block with it after Flick Flack, I can, and it gives me additional options closer to the end of the game, where if I have pitched it correctly, where I've pitched it with a Crane Dance, if somebody is on 7 life, you can basically get a guaranteed kill on them, because all you need is these 2 cards in your hand. You don't even need to pitch beforehand. All you need to do is play a Crane Dance, break your boots, and then play Heron's Flight. Heron's Flight will come in for 6 damage. It deals 3. It gets +2 because it's comboing off of Crane Dance, and then it gets +1 from Ira's ability. So it comes in for 6, and then you use your breaking scales, make it 7. And you basically get a guaranteed kill on them because, again, against Dorinthia, if you declare attack action, like the tall Dorinthia decks that are running around in the North American meta right now, and the European meta as well, they don't run any attack actions, so they can't block it. And you really only need 2 cards to do that. What you can also do is just, if you come into your Heron's Flight early because you weren't able to see Crane Dance to pitch it so that you can get them into the same hand, you can literally just Arsenal Heron's Flight and sit on it until you see a Crane Dance and just block with your whole hand every single turn. This card was popularized by Brendan Fitty Shades, and now everybody's playing it, so everybody's got to play Whisper of the Oracle as well. So you'll see it in pretty much every single Ira deck. I'm not taking credit for putting this card in there. I have it in because it's pretty good. It gives you additional options in the end game. It plays toward the strategy of the deck, which is being very, very defensive, and pitching correctly and just making sure that the cards that you need to come up near the end of the game, or if you're bringing your opponent to fatigue, are coming up. So it helps. But if you need to defend with it, you can defend with it. It's not the end of the world. You always have your Kadachi Drone of Brutality plan, which I'll probably go into a little bit later. Anything before I continue, Steve?
Well, I would have to see more of the deck that comes out because as you're going through the list, there's cards that are coming to mind, but it would make more sense for you to kind of go through the rest of the cards and then ask my questions later. Yeah.
Feel free to stop me whenever. I know I can talk and ramble on a little too much, and especially when I'm doing interviews, it gets worse. So The next one is Soul Beat Strike. Pretty good card. If it hits, it gets go again. That's literally it. It just deals 4 damage. It usually requires them to either block with 2 cards from their hand, or a card and equipment, which is good too. Obviously, getting equipment is pretty key because it just removes additional ways that your opponent can block. It helps you get closer to that end game where you're just stripping cards out of your opponent's hands with Kadachi, red attack essentially. Soul Beat Strike also, like, sometimes it's a gamble because, well, not necessarily a gamble, but you have to like bluff your opponent. Usually you have nothing in your hand after you play Soul Beat Strike. You have like a defense reaction or something like that. And oftentimes what will happen is that your opponent will just block for 3, call your bluff, and then you just arsenal your defense reaction and pass your turn. It's a good card. It's not like the best card in the deck, but it's there. Similar to Soul Beat Strike is Torrent of Tempo. This card costs 1, not 0. And again, still, if it hits, it gets go again. 5 damage, so it's nothing to scoff at. 5 damage is 5 damage. That's a quarter of your health and blitz. So people are usually trying to block it. This one usually does get the 2 cards blocking, or at least the card and the equipment. And yeah, if you get the go again on it, like, good for you. I hope you have something else to play with it. But basically, the way that this deck plays, generally speaking, after you play like a Torrent of Tempo or a Soul Beat Strike, unless your opponent had an off turn and you, for whatever reason, have like 4 or 5 cards in your 4 or 5 cards to play with, like 1 in your arsenal, 4 in your hand, chances are you don't really have anything to follow up after a Torrent of Tempo anyway. You're probably either going to be arsenaling and passing, or doing something similar. Maybe you have a Soul Beat Strike in your hand after this. If it hits, you can play Soul Beat Strike, but it does cost 1, so if you've pitched a blue, it's going to use all your resources anyway. There are times when you do get the go again, you have an attack action in your hand, but it's rare. This is basically just red attack that takes 2 cards out of their hand and keeps like taking cards out of their hand near the late game. It only costs 1, which is also pretty good. We also have Pounding Gale, same thing, deals 5, costs 1, blocks for 3, and the important thing here is that it has combo. If you've had to block with both your Crane Dance, and for a fact that you can't enable your Heron's Flight combo or your Fine Center combo or anything like that, then you can just play a Pounding Gale. Usually they'll block it for 2 and take 2, and then you can just break your Breaking Scales, deal +1. It also, gets the buff off Flick Flack, which is helpful. But yeah, it's just, again, costs 1, deals 5 damage. Good card, keeps cards out of your opponent's hand. After that, we have Flying Kick, which I love. This is probably one of my favorite cards in the deck. Usually the way that you're playing this is that you're getting counters on Tunic throughout the game. Once you have another counter on Tunic, you pitch a blue, you Kadachi, and then you take a counter off Tunic to pay for this card. It shows that it deals 5 damage, but if it's played as Chain Link 3 or higher, it gains +2. So you're Kadachi, and then you hit for 7, which is a really strong attack. These, like the Soul Beat Strike, Torrent of Tempo, Pounding Gale, those are the little guys. And now these attacks that I'm going to be showing are what I call the big boys, or the heavy hitters. And that's just because they're the ones that deal the most damage, and they're the ones that I think are the most key to the deck. The reason that Flying Kick is also good is because of E-Strike. You can, like, if you have an E-Strike and a Flying Kick in your hand, or an E-Strike in your arsenal, or a Flying Kick in your arsenal, and you draw into one of the two, it is just a disgusting amount of damage on your turn. Because all you have to do is pitch a blue. You pitch a blue, Kadachi for 1, play an E-Strike for 6 with go again, and then you play Flying Kick for 7 with your last 2 resource, which is just, it's heinous. It shouldn't be allowed, but it is. So as long as it's allowed, I'm going to be playing it. You can do that same combo with basically any of these other 2 cards, Command and Conquer or Drone of Brutality.
So I do have a question, sorry, with Enlightened Strike. So you ever find you playing Enlightened Strike as your second attack after Kodachi, and then having your Flying Kick in hand and wanting to perhaps use Enlightened Strike's draw card, use your Snap Scalers, and then kind of come in with your come in sorry come in with your flying kick afterwards to kind of make this the whole setup that much stronger. So this would come in
Yeah.
for 6 in that case, and you draw a card, and you know you can give it a go again. So you have
Yeah.
finding situations where that is a more preferred route, or just giving it the 2 damage with the 1, making it an 8, and
It's
not
all
drawing a
situ
card is more the stronger route.
Yeah, it's all situational. If you know what cards are coming up and you know that you know, E-strike draw a card, it's really hard to know what cards are coming up. But if you do and you E-strike draw a card and you know you're going to be drawing into like a defense reaction that you need to arsenal or something, it can be good. The only time that I would use the boots with E-strike is if I'm going E-strike for 7 or 8 off of Ira's ability and then playing something after. Usually that's like a game ender, or if you need to get momentum, if you have like the E-strike command and conquer in your hand, for example, then that's a great way to do it. If you have E-strike command and conquer, I would recommend just saying screw it to the find center plan. If you for some reason, if you have these 2 cards in your hand magically, or one's in your arsenal and you draw one in your hand and you're good with taking the damage from your opponent, if you Kodachi E-strike for 8 because it's buffed by Ira's ability, break the boots, and then command and conquer for 6, you're basically guaranteed to get their arsenal card or kill them. I don't know any way around that. And same goes for flying kick. You Kodachi for 1 and then E-strike for 8, break your boots, and play flying kick. That's a lot of damage. So there's a whole bunch of different routes that you can go. Usually for me personally, again, I like saving the boots till the end to use the find center combo, because I usually pitch for it, and I find that's my most consistent way to kill my opponents, and it plays more into my game plan of just being very defensive and waiting for my opportunities. This deck will not beat any like aggro Ira deck. If you're playing an aggro Ira deck, you have probably lost with this deck. It's the aggro Ira deck is just better into this deck, but this deck is good into warrior, which is what I find was mostly giving me trouble in the North American meta early on. So I tailored some of the choices toward building against warrior. Originally, like I'm not a deck builder by nature. I never really have been. I'm a net decker, and then I just I just take whatever deck that I've net decked and make little tweaks to it to with cards that I prefer. This deck. I mean, it's a lot of Ira decks look very similar, but this deck is basically just Jacob Pearson and Matt Rogers' calling list, and then I just made some changes based on cards that I liked or didn't like. But yeah, just to tailor it towards more of my play style and more towards, I guess, the North American meta, which early on we were seeing like a lot of Dorinthias. So it was mainly made to counteract all the Dorinthias that you were seeing. And then at the same time, if you were playing the Ira Mirror, a lot of players, I don't know how to say this nicely, but like the Ira Mirror usually comes down to skill in the matchup. Sometimes, like if they're playing an aggro Ira deck, you probably just don't have a chance. Like their deck just is better than yours if you're in the mirror with them. But most of the time, the Ira Mirror is just a game of skill, really, and it's about being as efficient as possible with what you have. So I don't like. I'm not trying to boost myself here, but like I'm confident that I can win the Ira Mirror versus most players. I did play Nick Butcher last night, and he absolutely destroyed me. But he was playing aggro Ira, so I mean, it's tough, and I'm definitely not a better player than Nick Butcher. So that's kind of how it goes. But for in terms of like a defensive deck that does well in the North American meta, I think that this has served me pretty well, and I think that it will continue to serve me well. But yeah, we'll go on to the defense reactions now, just because that's another big thing in the deck. Total defense reaction is 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 total. I wouldn't consider blue flick flag as a real defense reaction against warrior, because it only blocks for 2, so you basically have to throw in equipment if you're going to be blocking with it. But sometimes if they do like a cheeky blue iron song response for 1 or something like that, you can blue flick flack it and shut it down there. But yeah, overall, it's just the regular defense reactions. You got 2 blue flick flack, 2 yellow flick flack, 2 red flick flack. These are like very key in the Ira mirror. You basically flick flack their second Kodachi. Even red flick flack, I know it blocks for 4, and it feels like a waste to do it against the second Kodachi. But my God, is it ever good, because the next card you block with blocks for 5. So even if they play something for 7, rather than having to block with 2 cards, you just block with 1 card with combo from your hand, take 2 damage, and then you still have pressure on your turn because you still have 2 cards in your hand, or even possibly 3 if you played flick flack from your arsenal. After the flick flacks, I play springboards. I don't love springboard, but it's a pretty good card. Only blocks for 2 from your hand, so you basically have to arsenal it to get any value off it. But it is a yellow, so it pitches for 2, which enables a Kodachi, and it costs 0, so your Kodachis get go again, which is important. And then my last card, my secret North American tech that New Zealanders will probably start throwing up right now while they're watching the video, is a yellow sink below. Basically, like I said, this deck started as Jacob Pearson and Matt Rogers' calling list, and then I just made some changes, threw in a couple defense reactions. This used to be a yellow, what's the card called? A yellow Sigil of Solace. But I played so many warriors that every time I had Sigil of Solace in my hand, it was basically just a dead card. And yeah, I'm going to gain 2 life, but I'm probably going to eat a whole bunch of damage this turn, because the warrior's going to come in, like the tall warrior decks are going to come in for like 17,000 damage that I can't block because now I have this, stupid sigil in my hand, and I haven't seen a wizard all day because no one plays wizards in the North American meta. So I just swapped it out. I put in a yellow sink. I don't know. It was sort of a joke at first, to be honest with you, because I was like, why would I use a yellow when I could just use a red sink? The nice thing about it, I guess, is that it pitches for 2, so you can Kodachi with it, which I have in the past, but most of the time you're just defending with it. Sink's nice because when you defend with it, you get the effect where you can put a card from the bottom of your deck and draw a card. It's good, but if you're going to play it, don't be like me. Don't run a yellow sink. This is not good. Just run a red sink below. It's better. Because chances are you're going to be defending with it. It's in there for the warrior matchup, basically, and it's in there for the effect that it has. Red sink below is just miles and miles better than yellow sink below, so just run that. You'll have better success, especially against warrior players. This is just like my secret spice, so when people see it, they go like, wow, I really lost to this idiot running yellow sink below. But yeah, that's the deck.
So I do have a few questions. So I noticed that you're not running Razor. Is there a reason for that?
Yeah. So again, Jacob Pearson and Matt Rogers' calling list ran 1 Razor Reflex, and a lot of other Ira lists run at least 1 Razor Reflex, or they run 2 Razor Reflex. I think that Razor is really good if you are running an aggressive Ira deck. It just doesn't suit my playstyle. Because I'm not really playing aggressively, I'm looking to usually block on my turn, and then slowly chip away with Kodachis and wait for an opening to play a bigger attack. Razor doesn't really do much for me, basically. The specific reason that I took it out is because it only blocks for 2. And I found that most of the time I just ended up blocking with it when it was in my hand. I wasn't like waiting to play with it. And that's because, again, my playstyle is much more defensive than it is aggressive. So for me to think like, oh yeah, I'll just take all this damage and then I'll hit them with this and razor them after. It's never like the first the first way that I want to play something. Or the first way that I think of playing something. Because that's not the way that like the deck runs, specifically when I'm playing it. So I took it out. I didn't like that it blocked for 2. I found that it was always in my hand when I was getting like Command and Conquered or something like that. And I always had cards that blocked for 2 in my hand, and I'd be losing my arsenal card and taking a whole bunch of damage. And it felt pretty bad. So I swapped it out. Same thing with they're running Life for Life, I believe. I think all Ira decks are running Life for Life, which is an incredible card. It's super good in the mirror. It's just that card's unreal. But again, it only blocks for 2, and I found that when I was running it, every single time somebody would Command and Conquer me in the mirror, that's the card that would be stuck in my hand with like a defense reaction, and I don't know, two other cards that didn't enable me to be able to play properly on my turn. Basically, if I had to block with them, and then I'd end up losing my arsenal, or I'd have to block with my mask early or something like that. And it was just a real pain. So I basically, like this deck, I took out every card that blocks for 2, aside from Springboard, which can block for 4. Drone of Brutality, which is necessary for your end game game plan. And Blue Flick Flack, which is just too good in the mirror to take out, and it's another one of those cards that costs 0 and pitches for 3, so it enables your Kadachi, whatever attack you're playing.
So I'd assume that's why you're not playing Pummel as well, is because of the 2 block?
Yeah, so listen, so here's the thing. I don't think that, like, Pummel's a good card, don't get me wrong. But yeah, 2 block, and I don't think that you should be running it in an Ira deck. If you are, you're running it as your like secret spice and your 1-of card. It's I'm not gonna lie. I played somebody. I played my friend Mike the first time we did like an Ira mirror, and he actually beat me because he used Pummel in his Ira deck, which was the most ridiculous thing I thought that I could ever see. But it worked. So full credit to him. But he took it out shortly after. If you're going to be running Pummel, it's just better to run Razor Reflex. I think if you're running Pummel, you're probably on a more like aggressive play style. And Razor helps with your more aggressive play style a little bit better because it can give some of your attack actions go again. And that would be if you're running cards like Snatch, for example, you can give Snatch go again. If you use Torrent of Tempo and you have to get over, whatever their block is, they're usually going to be blocking for 6, then you can Razor it to give it go again. Just things like that to make sure that you keep pressure. I think that Pummel is a little bit expensive, so even if you are if you're playing Pummel, the chances that you're going to be able to get it off are so slim, because chances are by the time you're playing your hand, you're just pitching and you're going Kadachi, or big attack, or just Kadachi big attack, and you have no resource left to be able to play it. Pummel costs 2, so you can't just pay off your tunic and pay for it. You have to have a whole bunch of cards in your hand. And the way that the deck usually plays is that you don't have a whole bunch of cards in your hand. Like the Ira game plan is block with 2 cards, swing back with 2 cards, block with 2 cards, swing back with 2 cards. So Pummel doesn't really play into that strategy. Like I said, I've seen it used once and it worked once, because never in a million years would I have seen that coming. But it did. And it was spicy for the time, but I would never get hit with it again. I don't know if you're playing Ira and you somehow have 2 resources remaining in a Pummel in your hand after blocking out their last turn, then I don't know, you're probably just you're a better player than I am, I suppose.
So some of what I've seen is a turn 1 so attack with Kadachi first. They opt to usually just take the damage, and then the guy he razors or he pummels almost immediately, kind of catching the other player off guard. So I mean, maybe in that sort of off the cuff kind of play.
The thing about Pummel is that it can only be used on cards that cost 2 or more, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe I'm forgetting what Pummel does here, but I'm pretty sure it can only be used on cards that cost 2 or more. And it has to be on a club or a hammer, so you can't actually use it on Kadachis. The only cards that you can...
No, you're right.
Yeah, the only cards that you can use it on are the big boy cards. So you can pummel a Command and Conquer, for example. That would be disgusting. You pummel a Flying Kick, also disgusting. Pummel a Drone, you're gonna get if you get the pummel off, it's gonna be really good, because it's basically 4 free damage, and you get a card out of your opponent's hand. But Razor's just better because it can be used on the Kadachis, and it can be used. It only costs 1 resource, and it can be used on more cards in the deck. Like you can even Razor one of your, like if you have to play like a Rushing River as your third attack, for example, because that's all you have in your hand, you can still play Razor Reflex on it. Give it go again, maybe attack with something else afterwards. If you have like another garbage blue in your hand that you want to get rid of, for example. But yeah, Razor's just, it's better. It keeps your combos going. But I think that if you're running Razor, it should be in a more aggressive Ira deck, whereas this one is tailored specifically to be defensive.
So going back to your Heron's Flight, not Heron's Flight, the Fine Center.
Mm-hmm.
So typically, if we just get those on the table real quick.
Yep.
There it is, and that. So this is like your typical setup. So as you're mentioning before, you can give it the +1 damage, and the reason why it's kind of so strong is a lot of the times people are looking to block the second Kodachi to break up the masks chain. These are zeros, by the way. So it's Kodachi into
yeah, these don't cost anything, so you can pitch your beautiful yellow sink below, and then play your Crane Dance Fine Center if you have your boots up.
This is true.
But yeah, it's
well. What I like here is hypothetically, you're still able to play your Torrent Temple at the end of this string. Yes.
So Fine Center doesn't have go again after it.
Oh no,
Crane Dance. Yeah, Crane Dance only gets go again if you play Soulbead Strike before it. But if you were able to set up a Soulbead Strike Crane Dance Fine Center combo, I mean, you got to get a lot of setup for that. The cards are probably going to have to come perfectly to you, and chances are you're going to be wanting to play your Soulbead Strikes because you only run the two red ones. The blue ones got taken out for the Whisper of the Oracle that the Ira decks are now playing. But Fine Center doesn't have combo. Even if you aren't able to kill them with Fine Center for some like godforsaken reason, you get a Zen State token, which is also really good. Zen State token basically says Zen State enters the arena with 1 balance counter on it. At the beginning of your action phase, destroy Zen State unless you remove a balance counter from it. Whenever your hero would be dealt damage, prevent 1 damage that source would deal. So basically it says for 2 turns, you don't take 1 damage from every single attack that your opponent does, which is really, really helpful, especially in the Ira mirror. The only time that Fine Center doesn't kill is if they have a Sigil of Solace. But you're not going for the Crane Dance Fine Center. Like, you have to be cognizant of what your opponent's been pitching, what cards they have left in their deck. You're only going for the Crane Dance Fine Center combo or the Crane Dance Heron's Flight combo if you know that they don't have any sigils left in their deck. So ideally, you want to see 2 red sigils in their graveyard. If you've seen them play or pitch a yellow sigil throughout the game, then you should probably assume that they have at least 2 of them. And then this combo becomes less effective, and you have to swap towards your game plan of just getting to the late game where you're Kodachi, Drone of Brutality, and just doing that over and over and over again until your opponent runs out of cards to block with.
Makes a lot of sense. All right, well, that's I think I don't really have any more questions. If there's any any final thoughts you might have on your deck, or perhaps you want to go over. Actually, no. I think we got enough. Is there another character that people might see you playing in the not too distant future, or is there an event that players might be seeing you at anytime soon?
I mean, you guys will probably see me at every event under the sun. I'm gonna, I'm gonna continue to play in as many events as I can. You'll probably see me in every skirmish available until the end of time. So, I mean, if you play against me, say hi. I probably know you because we've probably played against each other before. But other than that, yeah, no, nothing super special. I think I know that Red Riot Games, you guys are doing an event soon. You haven't announced any specific details about it yet, but it's going to be another worldwide event. and I think that's going to be a lot of fun to play in. Get to test our skill against some more of the New Zealand players, which is always a good time. After playing against Nick Butcher last night, I think I have a lot to learn, but I'm excited to start learning. I don't know. I always want to get better. So any events where there are people from all around the world playing is an event that I'm interested in playing in for sure, because you can't get better unless you're playing people who are beating you.
And I think that's a great spot to leave off on. Dante, if you have any shout outs you want to do, any potential rivals out there that you're looking to face, we'd love to hear that. And then after that, we'll cut it off. So go ahead. Give you the final word.
Shout out to I guess shout out to Red Riot Games. Like you guys are watching the Red Riot Games YouTube channel, so I'm sure that you have an idea of who these guys are. But they have the best singles ever. Steve's not even paying me to say this or anything like that. Like I love their store. Every card in this deck I bought from RedRiotGames.com. I don't open boxes. I don't do any of that because I have no luck. So I just buy singles.
.ca.
And if you or .ca, okay, I put in .com and it brings me to the site anyway. But regardless, RedRiotGames.ca, it's the best place to go, best prices on singles. And when Monarch comes out, that's probably where you're going to want to be buying them from too. They have these gorgeous playmats. Oh my God, they're so beautiful. You're going to want to get some of these as well. I have this one. I have a Dorinthia one. I got 2 more on the way. I can't get enough. So believe me, they look so good. If you think it looks good now on screen, just wait till you see it in person. It's so good, so beautiful. But other than that, rivals that I want to play, not really. I don't really have any rivals per se. There's obviously a lot of good players that I enjoy playing against. I haven't got a chance to play Matt Rogers yet. I played Jacob Pearson in the Red Riot Games event, the 2K one. And that was a lot of fun. I got to pick his brain, learn a lot from him, have a chat with him, and that was a really good time. Super nice guy. I got to play Nick Butcher last night, which was also just like I'm playing all the New Zealand big boys. This is pretty cool. But I haven't gotten a chance to play Matt Rogers yet. So Matt, if you're watching this and you want to get a couple of games in, I'd love that too. But yeah, I mean that's pretty much it. Nothing else special really.
All right, and with that said, we'll end this here. Thank you, Dante, for this amazing deck profile, and hopefully this gives some of the Iras out there something to learn from. All right, with that said, this is Stephen Jennings from RedRiotGames.ca. Take care of each other and yourself. Peace.